And welcome to the Inland Northwest Wine Reviews Wine School. And today we're going to be doing Wine Tasting 101. I'm Chloe.
I'm Seth.
And welcome, and we're happy to have you join us. We want to walk through just the step-by-step process for tasting wine. So the next time you are in a tasting room or you're with friends, you can be a pro. All right,
Yeah.
Seth, why don't you take it away?
Okay. Well, let's see. So let's get started. But before we get started, usually when you want to taste a wine, taste a wine that you're familiar with, or don't have to spend too much money, depending on what you like. But for example, this is the one that I'm going to be tasting today. It's a Tempranillo from Spain, and it only cost me, I think, $10.99. So, and Spain is known for its value wines. You get good bang for your buck from countries like Spain. So let's see. So to begin, take your handy corkscrew. Top of the bottle, there's a foil. I like to cut the foil just at the very tip of the bottle, so it leaves the foil on most of the rest of the neck. So here we go. Um, then you want to just remove the cork. It's pretty simple. These waiter's corkscrews are really pretty easy to use. So.
And while you're removing the cork, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Why do some wineries use corks for their wine, but others have a screw cap? Does that mean anything? Is it just like winery choice, or why would they do that?
Well, so it's a good question. Originally, they always use corks as the closure, and in recent years they've been using. Here's a nice pop of the cork. Recently they've been using, screw caps and even synthetic corks, and they find it that in certain, like a lot of times with corks, it's easy, or not easy, but every once in a while you can get a bad batch of corks that are tainted, and what that'll do is spoil your wine.
Oh.
And also corks are expensive. Natural cork is expensive, but and so they've developed other closures. So like they came up with synthetic corks that were just kind of like a plastic or mushy, like similar to cork, and those are okay. But I think like a natural cork would fare better because it's a little bit more tighter in the neck, and kind of keeps the wine better. And the screw cap doesn't allow oxygen, which is good, and sometimes it doesn't quite allow the wine to improve over time. So depending on what kind of wine you like, I like the traditional cork just because it's kind of a traditional thing, and I love the sound of the pop of the cork. But yeah, definitely the screw cap is still a good way to keep your wine. So
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So now we're ready to taste. We got the cork out of the bottle. So you get your glass. We'll just pour ourselves a little, maybe about 3 ounces, just enough to cover the bottom of the glass. Usually when I taste, I like to swirl the wine a little bit first, so you can kind of get some oxygen on the wine. And what that does is unlock the flavor profiles, and kind of opens the wine up so you can get a better scent and flavor of it.
And then this is why then you want to just put a little bit of wine for the wine
Yeah.
tasting. You don't want it sloshing out of your glass or.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, you'll be spilling wine all over the place, which is not ideal. But now, after you swirl a while, you kind of stick your nose in there and try to get your nose into the glass as far as you can.
Now, does it help to open your mouth? I've heard that
yes.
sometimes to
Actually,
like
that is a
open your
good
mouth when you're
technique.
breathing in.
Yes, that's actually it's a preferred technique. So you can actually it really brings the scent through your nose all the way through your nasal passage, and then and you're allowed. It really helps with the flavors. And so, from what I can get, This wine it's got a nice, kind of a bright scent to it, and it smells kind of like a ripe blackberry kind of, which is, kind of typical red wines. Most of them are fruity characteristics to them.
Yeah, I definitely smell a little black pepper on mine. I can smell that
Yeah, that's always
spiciness to
I
it.
like that smell. Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
great one. This one does have a spicy smell as well.
Now, I sometimes see people swirling and then they're holding their wine up to a light and they're pointing out legs. That's not something that, as a basic wine taster, we need to sit there and worry about, right? That's for
Not
maybe the
really.
next level or two up.
Yeah, it's nothing too important. Some people like to do that just because they like the way the legs on the wine look, but it's nothing to be you really need to worry about. Um, but it's kind of fun to look at, the legs go down but yeah, it's not a necessary part of wine tasting.
And then
Um,
what about the color of the wine? That's something
well,
to notice each, like probably as you're in there taking a sniff to notice, the color. I've noticed sometimes when I taste wine, like the very rim of the top of where my wine is clear. Sometimes it's got a brownish hue. Those are things for a wine taster to take note of, right?
yeah, so usually a younger wine is gonna have a more brighter rim on it, and usually like a brighter like red color to it. Like for example, this one it's kind of got a nice bright ruby red color to it, which kind of usually indicates that it's a younger wine. Most of the younger wines kind of have more of the purple color, and then over time that color will fade a little bit.
Oh, okay.
And wines that have been aging for a while, typically their rim is going to get that little bit of brownish to it, slowly turn brown, which doesn't mean it's bad necessarily, but just means it's been aging.
Oh, okay.
And so, depending if you like, some people like to age their wines, and some people like to just take them home and drink them. So and we can discuss that further down the road as well when it comes to you know choosing between aged wine and buying wine
Young
just from the
wine.
store. Okay, now we've gotten a lot of air on our excuse me on our wine. Now we can take a little sip. Yeah, sometimes people like to switch the wine around, and that kind of gives you a taste, sense of the mouth feel of the wine. You can feel the tannins, which are kind of
Mhm.
chalky, and then you're also gonna feel that the burn from the acid um, and then you shouldn't taste alcohol because but it should be a nice balanced wine will kind of incorporate the tannins, the acids, and the flavor of the wine.
And you say just a little bit versus like a full on drink of wine, just because then you can kind of swish it in your mouth, or why is it just that you want to take a sip to taste versus just drink it?
It's a lot easier to taste the wine that way. A lot of times, if you have a full mouthful of wine, you can't really swish it around, and you're not going to be able to taste the wine as well. As opposed to like where you get a smaller sample of wine in your mouth, you can, suck in some air. Sometimes that'll help. Some people like to do that. You can swish it in your mouth. Then some people like to spit the wine. That's one way of telling how good the acids and tannins are. And so that's always another technique you can use. But this one is a 20, um, 20 wine, so it's definitely a younger wine, but it tastes really nice and fresh. It gets, it's showing the nice lighter uh, rim on it and the ruby red color, which indicates it's pretty new. So, and it's got a nice fresh taste to it. So, which is typical of a new younger wine. So,
Yeah, I'm finding that the one I'm drinking, it has like reminiscent of, I guess, kind of like those fall fruits. So it's kind of like the stone fruits in there um and things. But I do have to admit that when I first started tasting wine, so don't stress anybody that's new to this wine tasting, is when I first started tasting it, it was like, oh, it tastes like wine. And it took me a minute to be like, okay, well, I'll take another sip and I'll kind of think like, aside from just wine, what else do these flavors remind me of? And over time, I was able to kind of taste a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. At first, it's hard to actually pick out the flavors when you first start out tasting wine. It does take a little while. It takes a little practice, if you will, to get used to it. But after a while, after you kind of learn what you're tasting, and then you kind of train your palate a little to kind of pick up on all the different attributes of the wine. And then after a while, it gets, you'll be able to pick out those flavors real quick and be able to, taste the tannins and the acids. And it doesn't take too long. Just gotta, you know, just practice, I guess.
And so then as you're tasting, it's good to take notes as well. Starting with, I guess, if you can walk us through, Seth, what notes we would want to take. Like, what would I know we'd want to write down the name of the wine, but what else from that wine label would we want to have? And then, like, what other parts of our tasting should we make note of, to either reference later or just in general to remember, oh yeah, when I tried that wine, these are the things that I tasted or saw or smelled, whatever the case was.
Yeah. So usually when I'm gonna take notes on a wine, usually obviously I'll write down the name of the wine, um, and then I like to write down the where it's from, what region it's from. This is from Spain, and it's from Castilla y Leon. Um, and then I also will write down the alcohol, the alcohol percentage, and then the vintage as well. So you kind of get an idea. The wine's from, this one's from Castilla y Leon. It's a Tempranillo, and the name of the, and also the name of the grape. So like this is a Tempranillo. It's from Castilla y Leon. It's a 2019. It's got 14.5% alcohol. And so that kind of gives you a good way to gauge, good way to start.
Okay.
And then after that, usually a lot of times people like to write about the color. So like we were saying or talking about earlier, like this one has a ruby red, appearance to it with like a light rim around the around the edges. So that's always a good attribute to point out. And then also when you take a sniff, you want to think, if you think of the flavors that you get from that, I would, I usually just write down that after I take my first, it's on the nose, I'll write down like it as on the nose, it has, for example, we'll say this has blackberry and spice to it. Then you want to put it on your palate. So you take a little sample, suck in some air sometimes, and then you'll get a little bit different flavor profile when it's on your tongue. And so that's usually when you can pick out more of the flavor, see, and the spiciness from the acids. And that's all. So I usually put down what the palate was like. And then the last one that I usually put down when I'm taking notes is the finish. Usually the part of the wine that the very end, it gets through your palate, and then you're swallowing it, and that's where you can you taste it. Sometimes you get different flavors from that too, or else in a way, like I think if it has a nice smooth finish, then I think it's a well balanced wine. So this one. Yeah, it actually does have a nice finish to it. It's not too hot in terms of alcohol. Still got the nice, medium tannins to it. The spiciness from the acids are still there, and also it has a nice little fruitiness on the edge.
So when you say finish, you're kind of talking like that aftertaste or whatever
Yeah,
flavors kind of left in your mouth after
exactly.
drinking your
Yeah,
first
absolutely.
drink. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And those are basically the three things I'm looking for when I'm tasting wine.
Wow, that's very helpful. So thank you for walking us through that today.